Please forgive me. We are now going to go to the press conference in Sydney. It's just begun. Let's listen in.
During these events. My thoughts also remain with those hostages who have been freed. They will be provided every support they need in coming days, weeks and months. We are a peaceful, harmonious society, which is the envy of the world. Today, whilst we grieve, we must go about our usual business. We must work.
We must talk to our family. We must talk to our friends. But I say to everyone in New South Wales, today must come together like never before. We are stronger together. We will get through this. We will get through this. But the events that we have seen have shaken us, but they do not dampen our resolve. I'll ask the Commissioner to say some words.
Good morning. Thank you, Premier. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to now confirm and leave you in no mistake. We're now dealing with a critical incident. In police terms, that means that there's a detailed, thorough investigation which has already commenced. We need to actually find out what's happened here and what's happened inside that cafe. It's not time to speculate or to develop theories. We're going to work through the facts and we will advise you as soon as we can. At this time, we actually need to think about the hostages. The Premier's already indicated those that are caught up in the ordeal. I can only imagine the terror that they've been through. They're very brave people who, in many cases, were just buying a cup of coffee and they got caught up in this dreadful affair. We should reflect on their courage, the courage that they displayed during the many hours in that room. They had to make decisions, hard decisions, and our heart goes out to them. I'm sure you would agree. We too share the grief of the families and the pain that they've been through, not knowing what was happening to their loved ones and not being able to help them. It's been a distressing time for those families. I'm sure you would agree. To the people of Sydney, this was an isolated incident. It is an isolated incident. Do not let this sort of incident bring about any loss of confidence about working or visiting in our city. It was the act of an individual. This should never destroy or change the way of our life. And as the Premier's indicated, this won't change our lives. This will not change the things that we hold dear in this country. Right now, I ask for members of the community to come together. We're Australians, we support mates, we help friends, and this is exactly what we should be doing at this time. It's not about finding reasons to divide communities, but finding ways to actually heal the wounds, to help everyone grow stronger, because we all want a stronger Australia. I too would like to commend the work of our police. While everyone might now second guess as to what's actually occurred in the last hours, well, they're the ones who had to make the decision. Our police had to actually deal with this incident. It was tough, exactly.
Okay, so we were listening there live from Sydney to Andrew Chapone. He's the New South Wales Police Commissioner, saying that there is now an investigation. They are not going to speculate. He talked about the courage of the hostages, the pain of the families. He said it was an act of an individual, an isolated incident, and that it shouldn't lead to any loss of confidence within Sydney to just the day-to-day normal lives of people. I do want to apologise to Kristen because we did have to cut her off there to go to that press conference. But do stay with the BBC. Remember, we've got the live page on our website, bbcnews.com/news, and you can get all the very latest information on the aftermath of that siege in Sydney. It is now over. We understand one death of a hostage and the gunman has been killed. That's it from World Have Your Say, but do go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/World Have Your Say. Thanks for listening.
Hello, this is Issa Williams with news about Ebola from the BBC World Service. Tonight, it's business as usual for Catholic churches in Nigeria after restrictions imposed because of the virus outbreak. But first, there's a ray of hope for the three worst affected countries. The United Nations report has recommended that international creditors write off the debts they are owed by Guinea, Liberia and Sierra Leone. The idea is to give their economies a fresh start once the crisis is over. Dimitri Sanga helped compile the report.
for each country what kind of agreement they had under this highly indebted and poor country initiative, they might still have some residuals that they have to pay. And if you look into that, in terms of external debt, the total amount for these three countries is around 2.6 billion. This is the amount that we are calling for a debt cancellation for.
Well, joining me now in the studio is Richard Hamilton, our Africa editor. So, Richard, what does this mean?
Well, I think this commission is saying that there's been millions of dollars of aid poured into these countries, and that's, well, been a bit slow, but obviously very welcome. But it's looking ahead now at a sort of post-Ebola environment and saying that what's more important is that the debts are written off, and that will allow Guinea, Liberia and Sierra Leone, if you like, to start with a clean slate rather than starting from this massive amount of debt. So it's really looking forward to how they can recover after the outbreak.
And what's the overall economic prognosis as we go ahead now?
Well, the previous predictions had been absolutely catastrophic. People were talking about a sort of reversal of the renaissance of Africa and talking about impact on tourism in Kenya, South Africa, and very gloomy predictions. But this commission is saying that those earlier predictions were based on what they call patchy data and uncertain trajectory of where the epidemic was going. So, i.e., in the early days, they thought it would spread to places like Nigeria or Senegal, where it's likely cases would happen. Then that would have a massive economic impact, certainly in Nigeria with its oil industry. But because that hasn't happened and the outbreak has been more or less confined to those three countries, they only contribute less than 1% of GDP for the whole of Africa. So the economic prognosis is not looking so bad now. Of course, it's still devastating for those three countries. Their tourism is affected, spending, their budgets, their investments is devastated. But the wider picture is perhaps more optimistic.
Indeed, Richard Hamilton, many thanks indeed for joining us. Now, the World Health Organization has released updated Ebola figures. The number of dead is now 6,841. Sierra Leone has had the most cases, 8,273, with 2,033 deaths. The Irish-based charity Go has today officially opened a COVID treatment center in Sierra Leone in Port Lockery, 2 hours drive northeast of Freetown, the capital. It's the second of 6 that the British government has built in collaboration with various NGOs. Go's chief executive, Barry Andrews, a former Irish government minister, came into the studio to tell me about it.
We opened last Thursday and we took the first patients in yesterday, Sunday. So we will gradually scale up to the full capacity of the unit. When it reaches full capacity, you could have 100 patients. But it will take you a little bit of time to get there. We are very anxious to be as quick as possible in doing this, because I know there is some criticism in that regard, but there's a laboratory on site. So that means we'll be able to turn around the triage of the people that come to the hospital. The danger of hanging around the Ebola treatment centre are absolutely minimised.
What's staffing going to be like? I mean, do you have enough people to actually staff these facilities?
Yes, we did a recruitment drive, and amazingly, astonishingly, almost miraculously, they came not in their tens or their hundreds, but in their thousands. They were from all over the world. We're all very anxious and nervous. We had, as I said, we had 4 patients in over Sunday, 2 children and 2 older people. And the 9-year-old girl was the first patient, and unfortunately she's very poorly right now. So it really does sweep away a lot of the old rhetoric, a lot of the politics, a lot of the statistics. This is about ordinary individuals who have this child's family. So that is...
They talk about treating patients and their families with dignity. What exactly do you mean?
Well, you know, there is a sort of a cultural dynamic where people from outside of the country are coming to help. And in the best hospitals in the world, there's sometimes a tension between junior staff and senior staff. So we were careful when we recruited staff from outside Sierra Leone that they would be as sensitive as possible to the guests, primarily. They were there to help the people that they were treating, but also they were there to build up the health systems of the country in which they were operating, so that when they left, not only was powerful, but they had also put down the building blocks for the rebooting of the West African health systems in these 3 countries that have been worst affected.
And we stay in Sierra Leone, where a much-revered medical practitioner has picked up the virus after coming out of semi-retirement to tackle the disease. I asked our correspondent, Umar, to tell us more.
Well, doctors keep being infected with the coronavirus, the latest being one of the first-known physicians in the recent history of Sierra Leone. Dr. Victor Willoughby was diagnosed over the weekend and taken to an Italian-run specialized Ebola clinic. The 67-year-old becomes the 12th Sierra Leonean doctor to be infected. 10 of them have died. Contrary to wild speculation on social media, Deputy Minister of Health, Mariana Rahman, told me that the doctor's condition was stable and that she was responding to treatment very well. She saw him herself over the weekend. Meanwhile, junior doctors continue with their partial strike action, according to their Vice President, Robert Samuels. They are demanding that a specialized Ebola clinic be set up for health workers who get infected with the disease. Dr. Samuels said they have signed an agreement with the government, but that they would not resume work until government's pledge to meet their demands was realized in December, as promised.
News about Ebola from the BBC. Following the World Health Organization's declaration last October that Nigeria is Ebola-free, the Catholic Bishops' Conference has ordered churches to resume practices that have been suspended because of the outbreak of the virus. The Roman Catholic Archbishop of Lagos is Alfred Adewale Martins. What will be done differently now?
Now that the coronavirus has been called up, we believe that there is no need to stop people offering the sign of peace by handshake, using the holy water, and there is no difficulty with receiving the Holy Eucharist on the tongue anymore.
And are you not worried that this could be a bit complacent, because all it takes is just one case in your church for it to become a problem again?
Well, that was what our worry was, but that worry is not there anymore.
Now, the church has attributed the complete cure of the Ebola virus disease in Nigeria to Almighty God. I'm just wondering, to what extent does medical science play a part, and if it's indeed the will of God that the disease has been cured, why then go through the initial extraordinary steps of prevention in the first place?
Well, we have not said that it is only by the will of God alone that the incident was overcome, because we believe that obviously God Almighty has given us the wherewithal to make our own contribution towards overcoming the problem. So it is indeed because we believe that science and our own ways of life can make a contribution to overcoming the problem. That was why those situations were put in place. And because we thought that we not on them anymore, we decided to revert to our normal practices.
And that's it for this edition of News About Ebola. To get more or to indeed listen to previous programs, just go to bbcworldservice.com/News About Ebola. This is Lisa Williams in London. Join me tomorrow.
The BBC World Service.
Witness tells the story of great moments in world history.
The former Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi has been assassinated.
The crowd just froze, and then everybody started to stampede and ran in all kinds of different directions.
History told by the people who were there.
I thought I had had a rendezvous with my destiny.
Witness on the BBC World Service every day.
You're listening to the BBC World Service.
Discovery Today finds out about new technology, free routing from their airline pilots choose their own routes. That's half an hour.
This is the BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
It's 19 hours GMT. I'm Jackie Leonard and this is the newsroom from the BBC World Service. The siege at an Australian cafe is over. There's been a news conference within the past few minutes.
We have accounted for, at this stage, 17 hostages. We have, as you have reported, 2 deceased amongst the hostages and 6 that were uninjured. We also have a lone gunman who has been shot and killed.
Hostage takers been identified. We'll have more on what happened, how it was brought to an end. In other news, the United Nations agency says international creditors should cancel the debt of the 3 West African countries worst affected by Ebola. And in Spain, prosecutors have charged the Real Zaragoza football team, its coach and players in connection with the alleged fixing of a crucial match. Those stories here on the newsroom from the BBC in London. BBC News with Eileen Keane. Police in Australia say 2 hostages and a gunman were killed during a siege of a cafe in the heart of Sydney. 4 people were also wounded in what police said was an isolated incident. Earlier, Australian commandos stormed the cafe where the 50-year-old Iranian-born gunman had been holding a number of hostages throughout Monday. In dramatic scenes broadcast live, loud bangs were heard and several hostages ran to safety before sustained gunfire rang out. The gunman, Manharon Monis, a refugee, had been on bail for a string of violent offences. A few minutes ago, the New South Wales Police Commissioner, Andrew Scipione, said they were launching an investigation on what happened.
We need to actually find out what's happened here and what's happened inside that cafe. It's not time to speculate or to develop theories. We're going to work through the facts and we will advise you as soon as possible. This time we actually need to think about the consequences. The Premier's already indicated those that are caught up in the ordeal. I can only imagine the terror that they've been through. They're very brave people who, in many cases, were just buying a cup of coffee and they got caught up in this dreadful affair.
A United Nations report has asked international creditors to cancel the debts of the 3 countries worst affected by Ebola. The UN report said cancelling the combined debts would allow Sierra Leone, Liberia and Guinea to start afresh once the outbreak was under control. In what's being seen as a major blow to the Syrian government, rebels are reported to have overrun 2 military bases in the country's northwestern Idlib province. Jim Muir reports from Beirut.
The loss of the 2 bases near the city of Marat al-Noman in Idlib province is a considerable blow to the government. It had tried hard to hold on to them and managed to do so for more than 2 years, despite increasing rebel control in the province. But a collection of Islamist rebel groups, the Qaeda franchise Nusra Front to the fore, finally prevailed. According to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, one of the few main networks reporting from on the ground, government helicopters picked up some of the army officers before the rebels moved in, while some of the garrison fled to nearby villages where they came into renewed pressure.
The Russian currency has hit new lows against the US dollar. For the first time, the ruble has been trading at more than 60 to the dollar. Andrew Walker reports.
The loss of value has been rapid. It's fallen more than 45% against the dollar this year, with most of that decline in the last few months. The Russian central bank has tried unsuccessfully to stabilise the currency, buying rubles in the market and raising interest rates. But those efforts have been overwhelmed by the fall in the price of crude oil, one of the country's main exports, and are concerned that international sanctions over Ukraine might be stepped up. The main economic damage done in Russia by the currency fall is rising inflation.
World News from the BBC. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has told the European Union to mind its own business after it criticised police raids on several Turkish media organisations on Sunday. Mr Erdogan called the arrests of more than 20 opposition journalists and agencies sympathetic to a US-based opposition cleric a domestic security issue. Thousands of Germans have joined the 9th weekly protest march in the city of Dresden, demonstrating against what they say are criminal asylum seekers and the Islamisation of the country. The crowd repeated a chant used in the city in the weeks before the fall of the Berlin Wall 25 years ago: "We are the people." The movement is dominated by ordinary Germans, but is also associated with elements of the far right. Chancellor Angela Merkel warned Germans not to be exploited by extremists. Spain's anti-corruption prosecutor has asked a court to investigate Real Zaragoza football club, its former manager and 2 teams of players for allegedly fixing a match. The prosecution claims the club channeled $1.2 million in bribes to Levante's players for throwing the game. And Smith reports.
Bringing significant game of football in Europe. The match in question took place on the final day of the 2010-11 season. Real Zaragoza's 2-1 win at Levante narrowly avoided relegation to Spain's second tier. The Manchester United midfielder Ander Herrera was playing for the club at that time and has been named in his case, as has coach Javier Aguirre. The Spanish club has refused to comment.
The families of 9 people killed in an attack on a Sandy Hook primary school in the United States have filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the company that manufactured the gun used in the attack, the distributor and a local retailer. 20 children and 6 staff at the Start School in Newtown, Connecticut were killed when a former pupil, 20-year-old Adam Lanza, died. BBC News.
I'm Jackie Bennett, and in this edition of the newsroom we'll have more on that lawsuit from the Sandy Hook families. Fixing Poconan Tier, Spanish footballer. First vote to Australia. This was the New South Wales Police Commissioner, Andrew Schiponi, speaking just a few minutes ago.
Right now, I ask for members of the community to come together. We're Australians, we support mates, we help friends, and this is exactly what we should be doing at this time. It's not about finding reasons to divide communities, but finding ways to actually heal the wounds, to help everyone grow stronger, because we all want a stronger Australia.
The 16-hour hostage crisis was brought to a dramatic conclusion just after 2 a.m. local time. Heavily armed commandos stormed the cafe where a self-styled Iranian cleric, Man Haron Monis, was holding hostages at gunpoint. Teams of paramedics took away the injured on stretchers. Police say 3 people died, 2 hostages and the gunman. Man Haron Monis was known to Australian police and was facing more than 40 sexual and indecent assault charges. Our correspondent John Dawson sent this report.
A day full of drama in Sydney came to an end in the most dramatic of fashions. Amid a hail of gunfire and explosions in the early hours of the morning, Australian commandos stormed the cafe, which has been at the centre of this scene. Paramedics rushed in to help the injured. Citizens also witnessed the raid. Earlier in the evening, there were signs the gunman may have been losing control when a number of hostages managed to escape the cafe doors. The gunman has been named as Man Haron Monis, an Iranian cleric who moved to Australia seeking